I had a really strange experience during high school. It's so strange that I don't think anyone I have told actually believes me. They just kind of nod and listen. I can assure you that it's 100% true, but it's up to you what you want to believe. It happened during autumn of my second year. My high school was kind of unique. They didn't put much interest into school festivals at all. They just had a heavy focus on sports and cheerleading clubs. Every class was expected to show their spirit for our teams and help out with all the sporting events. My class decided to make a large signboard that we would position behind the cheerleaders. So along with a couple of my closer friends in the group, we formed a party to go out and find some wood. Well, to a bunch of teenage boys, wood isn't exactly hard to come by. But it is expensive. Wood from a tree, I mean, of course, lumber. We decided to go with bamboo to build the structure because that's abundantly available here in Japan. One kid in my class said that his family owned some land where we could find some bamboo. Now, I was expecting some small plot of land, but this kid's family's land included a mountain. So me and a couple of the other boys went with him to his mountain on a Saturday afternoon to cut down some bamboo. There were 5 of us in total. Thankfully, the bamboo thicket was just at the lower part of the mountain. There was a woodland trail, which wasn't paved, of course, in the middle of that thicket of bamboo, which led up to the mountain. I would say that the mountain was about 100 meters high. We found some suitable bamboo that would be strong enough to support the sign our class was making, and we set about cutting it down. As we were cut it, we were disturbed by a very strange noise. It seemed to be coming from far away, down the mountain path. It wasn't a human voice making that noise. It didn't even sound like an animal. It sounded like some kind of strange, metallic, mechanical sound. I don't know how to describe it. I thought it might have been some kind of electric saw, but the kid, whose land it was, said that there should be no one else but us on the mountain today. His parents had made sure that we would be alone, so we would be safe. I will do my best to explain this sound. First of all, it wasn't like an engine sound, but a different type of machine. Not much like a machine that cuts down trees, just a machine. I don't know, you just wouldn't expect this kind of machinery in the mountains. It sounded big. The 5 of us downed tools and just looked at one another. The metallic noise screeched out again. I got to my feet and decided to go in search of that noise. Probably a really dumb move, but I was a high school kid. Would I do it again at this age? I'm 25, by the way. Yeah, I think I probably would. Anyways, I started along that woodland path and my classmates followed along behind me. They were probably just as interested as I was. As we went further along the trail, we heard that noise again, and this time, the noise was coming from a little off to the right of the trail, in a dense grove of trees. We headed off the beaten track and into the woods. There were rocky outcrops here too. The landowner kid stopped and pointed at something in silence. I followed the direction of his finger with my eyes, and I was shocked to see a door. This door was attached to one of these rocky outcrops. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. It was like someone had built a secret base out here. But this couldn't be the work of kids or some homeless person. This was too impressive. The door that we 5 were looking at was made of metal, and it didn't have a handle. I didn't know how it could be opened or closed. A strange door in the middle of the woods is a hell of a sight, especially when that metal was the only non-natural thing in the vicinity, the only man-made thing out here. By the way, the door was open, and we could see darkness spilling out of it. I couldn't make out what was in there, but it looked like some kind of passageway. I turned to the landowner kid and I said, "Hey, what's with this door?" I really have no clue. I had no idea this was here. He took a couple of steps closer and he kept saying over and over that he had no clue why this doorway was here. Then he turned back to us and said, "Hey, let's look inside." Well, as soon as he said that, all I could think of was how horrible it would be if the door suddenly closed, if we were all on the inside. We would be trapped in there. We needed to take measures of precaution, so I suggested that we find a big rock or something to kind of wedge the door open. Only 3 of us wanted to go in out of the 5. The others were too scared, if I'm being completely honest. We found a rock big enough to wedge the door open, and I asked the other guys to stand guard for us and yell if something happened or if someone was coming. So, with the rock in place, the 3 of us headed in. My heart was beating in my chest. I was filled with a mix of excitement and fear. It was quite dark in there, and it made it difficult to see what was directly in front of us. Since us 3 were secret smokers, we all whipped out our lighters. I had a Zippo, so I headed the expedition into the tunnel with my other 2 friends to my left and my right, making a kind of triangle shape. I touched the walls of the passage at one point, and they felt like they were made of rock, like the mountain had been carved out. It was clear to me that this wasn't a natural occurrence in nature. The passageway had been created by some kind of machine. It was wide enough for one person to pass through, and it was making me feel a little claustrophobic, which made fear outweigh the excitement. I'd say we went about 10 meters or 32 feet into the passageway, and at that point it opened up into a wider area, like a room. There was nothing in this room area, no sign of life. Just an empty space. We couldn't see where the walls ended though. We talked about it briefly with one another, and we were considering whether to keep exploring or head back out. But then our friends outside made our minds up for us. Their voices echoed into the passageway. They shouted for us to come back. They sounded panicked and frightened. They were really worked up, and they were screaming themselves hoarse. Something had seriously scared them and thus scared us 3. Then came the panic. Like a wave washing over us, we were all freaked out and we ran for it. We needed to get out of that passageway. We hurried back towards the doorway, and to our utter disbelief, the door was moving. The rock alone wasn't enough to hold the door open. The 2 others were holding it back as best they could, but it seemed far too strong for them. We sprinted to the exit, and I saw that they were losing their battle with the door. I was at the back on the way out, since I was the first in, and I watched the first kid I was with get out and join the others holding the door open, and then the second kid helped when he got out. If they didn't do that, I know I would have been trapped in that passageway. I made it out just in the nick of time. The closing door scratched me as I brushed past it into the light of that autumn day. As everyone let go and moved away from the door, it made that mechanical sound we had heard earlier. The rock we wedged it open with rolled down the passageway into the dark before it finally slammed shut. It was clear to us now that the sound we heard before was this door opening and closing. According to one of the kids who waited on the outside for us, the door suddenly started closing without any warning, so that's when they grabbed it. Had they not done that, and had us 3 in the passageway ran a little slower, we would have been trapped in there. I couldn't help but shake the image of a Venus flytrap when that realization came to me. By the time we got out and calmed ourselves down, it was getting a little dark out, so we made plans to go back and investigate the following day. We came back and retraced our footsteps, but we couldn't find that doorway anywhere, nor the passage. It was almost like it never existed. None of us could believe that it was gone, without a trace. I have kept in touch with the landowner kid, and I check in with him now and then, but he says that he never saw that metal door, nor heard those mechanical sounds again. Strangest thing that's ever happened to me 100%, and I can't help but feel as if we avoided some kind of horrible fate that day. Hi, Jay here. This experience reminded me of something, and I just thought I'd share it with you. I'll take you out of Japan for just a moment and over to the United States, where we will briefly look at the mysterious case of Thomas Messick. Thomas Messick disappeared November 15th, 2015. His body has never been located. He was said to be an incredibly adept outdoorsman. And on that day in November, he led a hunting party out into the woods of Horicon, just south of Brant Lake, New York. It was an annual hunt, something he had done many times before. There were 7 members in his group, and they were hunting near a small body of water called the Lily Pond. They were employing a common hunting tactic called a deer drive. In this hunting technique, the team split up into 2 groups, one being the drivers. These guys chase deer into an open area, and the second group is called the watchers, who assemble in a distanced line, aimed and ready to shoot. The younger members of that group that day claimed that they experienced an eerie silence. They said that all the sounds of nature disappeared as they moved to the area that Tom Messick, in his watcher position, was waiting. When they arrived at the spot he was supposed to be waiting for them at, they were shocked to see he wasn't there. Obviously, they were confused, and since Thomas can be considered an elderly individual, they quickly began a search concerned for his well-being. Despite Thomas's advanced years, he could certainly take care of himself. He was an ex-paratrooper for the US Army, and as said previously, he was an expert huntsman and woodsman. He imparted his wisdom of hunting and survival techniques as a teacher. This is what made his disappearance stand out. He was essentially an expert in survival, and his hunting group were very close by. Forest rangers were called, and the search began at around 4:30, and went on as it grew darker. Forest rangers used car horns to try and attract Thomas, but there was no sign of him. The following day, 13 trained rescue professionals entered the woods in search of the missing outdoorsman. There was a huge effort to find him, which enlisted the help of some 300 individuals, including helicopter searches, trained dogs, divers, and even the FBI. There was no signs of his walkie-talkie, nor his rifle, and he used that walkie-talkie to communicate with his fellow huntsmen. No evidence of his disappearance has ever been found, and the formal search ended on November 26, 2015. It was as if he disappeared into thin air. So what happened? Well, no one really knows for sure, but the walkie-talkie is an interesting item to focus on. He had it with him, and he was in range of the other members of his party, so why didn't he use it if he was in some form of distress? If he got lost or he was hurt, he would have been able to get in touch with his party members. The FBI's presence was also unusual, as they don't usually wade into missing person cases of his nature. Sources claimed that they informed his wife that, quote, something wasn't right, but they didn't share any theories as to what that meant. This sparked some rumors that there was a hidden agenda behind the FBI's investigation and pointed to other disappearances in US national parks. Had Thomas struggled or had been caught by a surprised attack, there would have been some kind of signs of boot prints in the area, and his close-by hunting party would have likely heard this attack. On top of this, we must remember his skills. It would have been difficult to ambush an experienced and armed marksman. How would they have removed his body as well without any attention? No one in his party heard a car approach in the one road in and out of the area that they were in. How did he go missing without a vehicle, a struggle, or any communications from Thomas's walkie-talkie? Well, this is where I found the story in Japan similar, because there was in fact a sound heard by a member of his hunting group moments before the disappearance. Sid Sharp, a longtime friend and hunting partner, noted an extremely bizarre metallic noise booming out of the forest in the moments preceding Thomas's disappearance. He estimated it to be about 150 meters away from where Thomas was waiting for the deer. Sid had been hunting for 5 decades and told investigators that the sound he heard that day was one he had never heard the like of before. He said, quote, "It would be hard for me to explain, but it was different, something different than I had heard in the woods before. I just can't say what it was before, you know?" Many speculate that the 2 events had to be connected, as they were too coincidental. Now I, Jay, am not saying that they are the same thing. the story I translated and the sad disappearance of Thomas. I just wanted to say that I was reminded of his missing person case when I came across this story, and I thought it would be interesting to share it. Strange phenomena are reported in national parks and woodlands all across the globe. It's an interesting and terrifying world out there, isn't it? My father's family home lies deep in the mountains of Kyushu. We're talking a little step up from what most consider to be the countryside or even the middle of nowhere. We got a call from my aunt one evening, and we found out that my aunt, who lived in the house my father grew up in, had planned some renovations. She said that there might be some old books and manga from the early Showa period, which I could have if I wanted. Hi, Jay here. Early Showa period would have probably been about 1926 to 1936 at a guess, as the Showa period started in 1926 and ended in 1989. Therefore, the books and manga might have been worth something, or they would have at least have been kind of rare. Back to the story. I was more than interested in checking out those books. I was a teenager, a male by the way, if that matters at all, and I was developing an interest in history and literature. So my father and I headed over there to help my aunt out. It was the first time that I had been over there in about 5 or 6 years, and along with my dad and me, I heard my cousin was heading over. It would have been the first time I had seen him since my grandparents passed on, which was about 10 years ago. When we arrived, we were greeted by my aunt, who literally came rushing out to our car. I guess that she was excited to see us, but it seemed a little bit much. After we all said our hellos and dispensed with the small talk, she revealed to me the reason why she was so excited. She found something. She said that behind the Buddhist altar, that no one had ever thought to move, was, in her words, an unopened room. Well, to a boy my age, that was just about the most interesting thing I had ever heard, and I wanted to see that room and what was inside it. The very idea of a secret room sent me and my cousin wild. Hi, Jay here again, sorry. I've slapped a photo of a Buddhist altar on the screen now, as it is kind of hard to contextualize if you haven't seen one of these before. This is one of the bigger ones, which I imagine the writer is talking about. I have seen ones like this though. Another image is on the screen now. Seeing one of these in an abandoned property is pretty spooky, but that's a story for another day. But as you can imagine, they're pretty hefty to move if they aren't already sort of like flush to the wall. Anyways, imagine that. Back to the story. I asked my dad if he knew anything about it, and he said that he didn't. The Buddhist altar in the house was so big that it covered the wall from the floor to the ceiling. We all went straight inside to go and see what my aunt had discovered. The altar was sort of built into the wall, so there could have been no access at all to that room for my grandparents. So what was the purpose of it? It was so weird. No one had a clue. We couldn't even come up with a guess. Before renovations began, I had to know what was in that room. We all couldn't resist the mystery of what might be behind the door. There were some weird etchings and markings on the door, some symbols and signs from times gone by, but we pushed on, and with a creak the door opened and we weren't ready for what we saw. There was a weird display, like a cabinet with something in it. There was a small skeleton which had been dressed in a kimono. That sent everyone into an uproar. We called someone out, had the bones examined by the police, and the short story with the bones is, thankfully they didn't belong to a human. The examiner thought that it could have been the bones of a primate, likely a monkey. It is completely unknown to us why our grandparents had that skeleton and why they dressed it up in a kimono. I really have no clue, and that's why I'm here. I'm asking if anyone knows of any reason why anyone would do this, or if anyone has found something similar. I know it's a long shot, and a lot of you will likely think that my grandparents are mad or something, but trust me, they weren't. They were always so nice. Seeing that secret really freaked me out, and I'm optimistically hoping that there might be a good reason behind it. Oh, also, there were numerous boxes in there. I opened some and I found a kind of mummified finger in there. What the hell was that? Anyone, please let me know. Hi, Jay here. Well, unfortunately, there was only one reply, but it was an interesting one. My family didn't have one of those secret rooms you're talking about, but they did have a mummified monkey hand. They kept it in a little wooden box. I asked them about it recently, actually. They said that there was a curse or a spell that people used to cast in the past. If someone broke in and stole something, then the mummified monkey hand would curse the thief. My dad said something like, the hand helps you search for them too. I'm not sure, but I guess in the past everyone knew everyone in their tight-knit communities. By the way, we also live out in rural Kyushu. This happened when I was on a trip in Kyoto. I was set to be staying in a traditional Japanese inn, a ryokan. The inn was incredibly old, as they usually are. It was mainly a wooden construction. It was a work trip. I work as a tour guide up and down the country. This isn't as luxurious as it sounds, by the way. The reason being, my company always booked the cheapest hotel rooms they could find for its employees. Work trips, and more often than not, employees shared rooms to make another saving. I was relatively new to the company when this experience took place. It seemed as if the room in the inn that my colleagues and I were going to be staying in was one that wasn't often rented out. The inn was almost fully booked, besides that room apparently. When I got in there, I thought, whoa, it's pretty dark, and it's actually pretty creepy in here. But I didn't know why I felt that way. I had some time to kill before we had dinner, so I looked around the hotel room. I opened a big closet door to see what was in there, and then when I closed the closet door and turned to leave, I noticed something behind it. There was some kind of door. I shoved the heavy wardrobe to one side to get a better look at it. Affixed to the door was this strange kind of talisman that looked to me like a kind of seal of some religious variety. The door was sealed tight. There were no gaps. I guessed that this must have been the door to the attic since we were on the top floor. That weird door gave me goosebumps. I moved the wardrobe back where it was. I thought the dim light in the room was the cause of that creepy feeling I had before, but I guessed that the door might have had something to do with it. I didn't feel like being alone in that room anymore, so I went to try and find the other guys. There were 4 of us in total. All of us were going to be sleeping in that room. I told one of my colleagues about my discovery, the weird, sealed-off hidden door, but he didn't seem that fazed. He wasn't even that interested. I asked him outright why he wasn't surprised by what I found, and he said, "Well, if I spent my time looking for things to be surprised at, then I wouldn't exactly be focused on my work, now would I?" Suit yourself, I thought, as I walked off. I was convinced that there wouldn't be any other rooms left available in the inn, so I just had to bear it. At least, I wasn't going to be sleeping alone. That was something, I guess. We all hung out, talking about work and what we would be doing tomorrow, in a kind of informal meeting, until about 1 a.m. Although it sounds boring, it turned out to be a pretty fun night. We had a couple of drinks, everybody loosened up a little, and I felt a little bit more at ease. I took a bath. It was a very nice bath, actually. And then I went to bed at about 2 a.m. Everyone else was just about ready for bed by that time too. About 10 minutes after the lights went out, we were all in bed and I heard some light snoring. I guessed that everyone was asleep. I, on the other hand, couldn't get to sleep no matter how many times I flipped the pillow or changed my position. It was around that time that I started to hear the noises. At first I could hardly hear it, but then after a few moments, the sound grew louder. It was coming from above us. It sounded like someone was walking around up there. It sounded like someone was just walking around and around in a circle. After a while longer, I heard a second pair of footsteps. The second set of footsteps sounded like they were a little further away from the first. It sounded like the two owners of those footsteps were talking. I couldn't make out what they were saying, but I could get a sense of the tones that they were using. And I can say that the tone I was hearing wasn't a nice tone. It sounded like they were having an argument. I didn't like it, because obviously I knew that the door to the attic was sealed shut, and it had a wardrobe in front of it. Those voices and footsteps up there really freaked me out. There surely couldn't be anyone up there. I asked myself that question, but I was unable to answer it. I worked myself up so much that I really wanted to turn the light on. I was essentially scared of the dark as an adult, and it was pretty embarrassing in a room full of other adult men. I'm a man too, by the way. I tried to resist, but I couldn't fight it. I was scared. I got up and I headed towards the light switch. As soon as the lights came on, all the noises from above stopped, and the attic fell silent. I stood there in place by the light switch for a moment, listening intently, and then I woke up one of my colleagues. I had to talk to someone. I went for my work friend who was the nicest to me, not that guy I spoke to earlier. I woke him up and I told him what happened. He was annoyed, of course, that I woke him up, but overall not that surprised by what I had to say. He said that there was a reason why this room was so cheap, and a couple of them found out last time after they heard strange noises. They ended up searching online about the inn after they stayed there. They read that others had experienced things, and some said that it was haunted. He then asked me, "Why do you think we all stayed up so late?" I asked him why the hell he didn't tell me that we were staying in a goddamn haunted house. He said that if I knew it was haunted, I'd never go to sleep. He said that because he knew my character. Well, how kind of you, my friend, I thought as I slunk back to my bed. I buried my head in the covers and I barely got a wink of sleep that night. I think something very sad happened up in the attic of the inn. I get that feeling. I don't particularly want to find out what it was, though. When I was younger, the elementary school that I went to had a kind of mystery that all its kids were wrapped up in. There was a room at school with an unopenable door. I don't know when or how it started, but all the kids said that there was this one door that no one ever opened and seemed to be eternally locked. That was until one day, when one kid from school, who was asked to return some supplies in our after-school club to the stationery cupboard, noticed that the door was open. He wasn't that interested in it, as he had been told by our teachers to not go into that room, and that it was off limits. He was in the same class as me, by the way. He told me once that the door gave him a bad feeling. I didn't really get that from the door myself at the time. We were all staying late after class. I cannot remember why. Probably some after-school activity. When he came back to our class, he told me and another classmate that the door was open. We were both interested in finding out what might be behind the door, So my classmate, perhaps driven by curiosity, piped up and said, "I'll go take a look." He got to his feet to go check it out. I went with him, but I didn't want to go into that room. I wasn't profoundly scared of whatever was inside it. I was more scared of getting a detention or something, so I waited outside. I realized that I had been waiting for a while for him to come back. I started to get nervous. All the other kids were leaving, and even some of the teachers looked like they were getting ready to go too. I nervously paced the corridor, but no matter how long I waited for him, he never came out of that room. It just didn't make any sense to me. I didn't want to go in before, and I definitely didn't want to go in then. But I got worried, and I approached the door to see if I could make out where he went. Just as I was about to crane my head around the door frame, a teacher came along. I told the teacher what happened, and she looked shocked. She made an attempt to look in there, and then she muttered something like, "Should have locked this door." That was when I realized, for a brief while, that the rumor was just a rumor, and it was just a door. Just a door that they locked. I felt a bit dumb for believing that some door at school had some kind of power. The teacher went inside very briefly and then came out and said something outrageous. "There's no one in there." That just didn't seem possible to me. I watched my classmate go in there and not come out. And therefore he just had to be in there. Logic dictated that to me back then, and it still does now. He went in and he did not come out. I asked the teacher if she was sure, and she said to me in a very cold tone, "There is no one in that room." She went ahead and shut the door as she said it. I went home because everyone else was leaving. I didn't know what else to do. I was a kid. I couldn't stay there all night. I told my mum about what happened, and she must have seen how worked up I was, because she called the school in the hope that a teacher or a janitor might be there still. She came into my bedroom after she got off the phone with someone, beaming this big smile, and said to me, "Your little class friend went home in the end. One of your teachers told me so." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. No, he didn't go home. I was waiting for him. He went in that room and he didn't come out. By the way, this wasn't some room that was massive or was on the ground floor or anything like that. This was a room on the 3rd floor. Had he jumped out of a window, he wouldn't have made it home in one piece. I can't believe that the teacher didn't even bother to go in and do a proper sweep of the room either, come to think of it. And now they were telling me that he just went home? I wasn't buying it. My mum laughed at my frustration and then said I must have just misunderstood the situation. No, Mum, I didn't misunderstand. I was being lied to. I knew that then, and I know that now. I couldn't wait for school the next day. I had so many questions, and if I'm being honest, some small part of me did believe that there was a tiny chance that my classmate ended up going home somehow. Hell, perhaps he hid in that room to avoid the teachers for a prank, I don't know. Like I said though, a very, very small part of me held out hope for that. When I got to school, I looked over at the desk he would have occupied, and it was empty. I hoped against my better judgment that he might just be running late, but I was once again wrong. I was told before the end of the day that he moved away by my regular teacher. His dad apparently got transferred at work, and it had been planned for a long time. I never saw that door he went through open again after that, and I still get very anxious about what happened. I mean, did he really move? It's possible, sure, but why was everything so sudden? And why was all the news coming out of our teachers and none of it out of him? It didn't make any sense to me. It's been so long that I can't remember his name, and I kind of can't trust my memory. It just seems kind of hazy. A lot of weird stuff went on in my hometown. There was always a big military and police presence. I don't know if that means anything, but as an adult I realized that my town was pretty unique. I just wonder if he saw something that he wasn't supposed to. I know that sounds kind of ridiculous with it being a school and all, but the phrase, hiding in plain sight, makes me think otherwise sometimes. I really want to know if that kid ended up being alright. I really hope that's the case. I think about this often. I'd go back to our school, but it isn't there anymore. There's a door that cannot be opened at my company. This is true, however, it probably sounds like fiction. Let me start at the beginning. Our company building has 3 floors. There's a storage room on the 3rd floor. Right at the back of that storage room is the door. I first noticed that door when I was new to the company. I was asked to go and pick something up from the storage room. I asked one of the senior employees I was with at the time about it, and he just told me not to worry about it. When I looked at the building from the outside, I could see that there seemed to be a room beyond where the door was, and there was even a window. The curtains were closed though, so I couldn't see inside. It was a little weird, but I just assumed that it was part of the storage room. I kind of forgot about it, to be honest. Well, until about a month ago. About a month ago, a new employee, I'll keep his name anon, let's just call him K, was assigned to our department. I remembered what it was like being new. The new guys always get the thankless and difficult jobs. He was told to do a lot of the stuff that I used to do. One day K came to me with a question, and it went a little like this. "Hi, Yanagihara-san. I went to the storage room the other day." Before he could finish his sentence, I knew what was coming, so I interrupted him. "The door, right?" "Yeah, of course, the one at the back." We had a little laugh about it since we had both noticed it. I figured he was a little bit like me. We might be on the same wavelength or something. I said to him, "You know, I don't know much about that door myself." When I asked about it, the seniors told me not to pay it any mind. "I see, it looks like it's locked, but maybe someone has the key." "Ah, well, I never tried the storage room key, maybe that'll work," I told him. "It's probably worth a try, right? I'll try it next time I'm down there," he said. Kay seemed to me, at the time, a pretty curious guy, and the more I got to know him, the more curious he seemed. He was always asking questions about co-workers, the company, stuff like that. He was obsessed with that door and whatever lay behind it. I have to admit, he did kind of rekindle my interest in that strange door. If he got in there, I wanted to know what he found, so I made an effort to speak to him every time I passed him at work. He came to me a couple of days after we had that initial chat about the door and said, "It's no good, Yanagihara-san. The storage room key doesn't open the door, unfortunately." It seemed like he was really keen to get in there. "Ah, that's a shame, Kay. There must be a key around here somewhere that can open that door." "Well, I thought about that too, but I'm actually not too sure about that. I don't think it'll work." "Huh?" "Well, the thing is, it's locked, and you can't get a key in the lock on our side of the door." "What? How does that work? Does that mean it's locked from the inside, and the key is in the lock?" "I guess so." I felt a bit weirded out by that information. I felt a kind of chill. The key is on the inside. What does that mean? Does that mean that there's someone in that room? Well, that's not exactly impossible, I guess, but it was kind of more than unusual. Kay then said, "What's going on then? Do you think that room is reserved for someone?" "Oh, if that's the case, then whoever uses it can come and go as they please. So not much to worry about there, I guess. It's not like someone's locked in there," I told him. Then something occurred to me. I wonder if we have an employee who's socially withdrawn or autistic, maybe. "No, that can't be right." I thought, oh wow, you can't picture that, eh? It's a little close-minded. "Even if there was someone in there using the room, how are they supposed to get in and out of the storage room?" I didn't get what he was talking about at first, but then I got it. The storage room key. The storage room was to be locked at all times. It was basically just used for storage, so the keys were kept with us in the office on the 2nd floor. We didn't leave it open as it had some private client information and classified paperwork in there. So if someone was in that room, then every time we were locking the storage room, we were essentially locking them in there. I thought about all those late nights I worked overtime, and I remembered that I never once saw lights from outside on when I left for home. I know for a fact that on more than a few occasions, I was the last to leave the building. There was a gap in the curtains of that room. I noticed it before. Not a big gap, but a gap. And if someone was in there, then surely they wouldn't have been working in the dark. Yet no light spilled out from behind the curtains. No light at all. "I'm gonna do some research," Kay said. "Well, don't go too nuts," I joked with him. I was on a business trip the following day to meet some clients and to entertain them in the evening. It was actually quite a heavy drinking session. 3 days later, I returned to the office. The first thing I heard when I got back was that Kay hadn't shown up for the last 2 days. I thought that was a little odd, but not too much to worry about. But later, I had heard when someone went to check on him, they found his apartment empty too. Concerned for his well-being, our HR department contacted his parents, and they were shocked to hear he was missing, as he wasn't with them. However, as I was just back from my business trip, I had work to do, and I didn't get caught up on what had happened to Kay until I had gotten myself settled. It was weird. I immediately thought of the door in the storage room. I realized that I had gotten an email from Kay whilst I was away. I must have ignored it because I was busy with the clients. It had been sent 3 days ago, basically the night I left for the trip. I opened his email, and it consisted of only a couple words. It read, "I opened it." A few weeks have gone by, and there's still been no sign of Kay. Now, I'm not the type to jump to conclusions, so I didn't think that the mysterious door had anything to do with his disappearance at first. I mean, people quit jobs, move towns without saying so for the most part. It's not exactly uncommon. But as the days turned to weeks, I couldn't help but feel that the door was somehow connected. I tried not to go to the storage room anymore. I couldn't fight my curiosity. I went and spoke with one of the seniors who had worked at our company for a long time, and I asked him about that door. In summary, he said the following, and it doesn't make the most amount of sense. To me, maybe it'll make sense to someone else out there. About 10 years ago, there was another young employee, someone fresh out of college, who developed a very strong interest in the door, and apparently he went missing. He kept saying that it had a bad aura, and there was something behind that door that we shouldn't mess with. Some said that it had a demonic quality, perhaps someone had made a Faustian deal with the devil or something. Spirits are said to gather behind that door, and that really spooked me out. When the company formally opened in this building, he said someone placed something behind that door and made sure that no one could enter it. It was off limits. I asked him if he knew what was on the other side of that door, and he said, "I don't know. I think only the president of our company knows, and I think you'd be wise not to ask him." I heard from a source I won't mention that they put some kind of object of worship in there. It's like a suspicious looking pot or something. There were sacrifices made, and evidence of them in that pot. So why does the room have a window if no one's supposed to know what's in there? He was quiet for a little while, and took his time to think about what I asked him, and then he responded, "To lure someone in, you need something to attract them, right? Bait to a fish, that kind of deal. Here's some inside advice, son. Don't look at the window, or even at the door. Pretend it doesn't exist. It's for the best." I couldn't help but picture Kay calling out to me from that window for some reason. Every time I pass by that window, I feel as if someone's watching me. I feel so tempted to look, to go to the door and check. I can't bear it anymore. I've put myself forward for a transfer. It's so strange that a mundane building can become an object of terror. How anything can happen. It makes me think of what kind of things happen in buildings we pass by every day. There's something behind that door, and I think it can come and go as it pleases.